Let's see here. So excited. I've been really enjoying these Friday demos. Hello,
Hey,
Suhita.
good.
How
I
are
can see.
you?
How are you? I'm gonna just take a minute and set up and make sure.
Oh, absolutely. I'm so happy to have you join me today.
That's fun. I'm gonna see if I can see what we're doing while I set up. That
Wonderful.
may or may not happen. We'll see. Okay.
And and you're down in California?
I am. I'm in San Jose, so Northern California, just south of San Francisco. So same time zone as you, luckily. That's one of those things that's been quite a challenge to manage.
I know you caught me having a little mistake yesterday in remembering my timing.
Yeah, it's
I,
happening on everything. I think we're gonna all have to just go with GMT because it's
yeah,
hard to translate. Luckily, we're in one time zone. So,
absolutely. It makes it easy. Well, we're so happy that people can join us and we can have the recordings. And Suhita, been a fan of your work for some time, following you on Instagram and your sketches. I hope someday I might visit one of your workshops, but really love your approach to sketching and really, I think, dynamic, energetic lines and thinking about some of the mixed media. And I have to share with you that the toned paper too is just such a cool thing. And I wonder if I might just do a quick little show and tell
sure.
this is stuff I've been playing with for years in my own work too. This is an early sketch of an iceberg from 2005 and my first time in Greenland. And I've loved working on blue paper. This might be a little too big. This is a early
There you go. We can
self-portrait
see
of
that.
myself on toned paper. And so this toned paper approach is something really near and dear to my own expeditionary art. So I'm really
Nice.
excited to learn more about your approaches.
Sure. And it's been kind of fun. It's one of those things, I think some things come out of necessity as the places and things with drawing have become narrow and I can't just run off and find something new to draw. It's been interesting to
Mm-hmm.
dig in and draw the same things, but with different approaches and sometimes with different tools. And I draw on and off on toned paper, but it's become almost like an alternative tool just now because it kind of helps you see in a different way to have color down.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
yeah, so I thought we'd play with that idea today and see if we
That's
can.
great. Yeah,
Yeah,
and thinking about too what you were just saying, to have a fresh approach to something that may feel really familiar. And I think in this period that that's really helpful as we're all staying closer to home.
sure, sure. I mean, it's a big one when you're maybe drawing the same things over and over. I mean, part of me wants to run off and draw in exciting places, but it's also been really nice to have familiar subjects. So you know what you're drawing, you've drawn it often, and then you get to experiment with, I don't know, all the stuff that lies around my studio and never gets used.
Well, Suhita, would you want to show us a little bit of what you have, some of your tools today?
Sure, sure. I have the book I'm working in currently right here. And I should have fixed this, but my camera is doing a left to right, like a mirror flip. But I don't think it really affects things, except things always look a bit strange when they're flipped like this. But so I've been working in this. It's a Stillman and Burnstone book, but it's been fun to draw the things on my desk, sort of in this approach. So I have this one medical skull that sits around all the time. Sorry, you can see all the backward writing in my book, but yeah, so that's been something I I've been using the toned paper. It's interesting to use toned because you get to think of, usually I'm thinking, because I work a lot in watercolors, about leaving the highlights, and what you decide to leave alone on your paper, actually you think about a great deal. So it's been interesting to think of the midtones, and the highlights and the darks I get to work in, but to leave the midtones has been kind of a fun way to work.
Yeah, and you get such a unified mood working first on toned, because you get to build up the darks and build up the brights. And I think it's a nice play with that transparent media, and then pulling in a little white wash.
It's like a ground, isn't it? I hadn't thought of that. The fact that it's a ground that kind of shows through. So it's basically unifying your color palette, because it's bringing that background color into everything, keeps it from being super garish and bright. Let's see what else I have in here. I marked some pages so we don't skip all over. I'm using it for everything, including drawing from my car. So scenes from the car when I have an errand to run. Again, working on toned paper means I really notice. So now I don't have to paint in the whole road and paint in. Instead, I get to paint in, all the markings on the road in white, which has been kind of fun. Otherwise, I'm working around them. It's just been fun to work like this. Yeah, it's a nice change. I draw friends when we Zoom. That's in colored pencil. And then the mail van when it parked outside my home. That was fun, because if the mail van stops by, I'm going to draw it.
Yeah, and that's so nice and bright. Really good.
Question for you: are you seeing a lag between video and audio, or is it pretty good for most people? Because I'm seeing a huge lag, but it doesn't have to. It's okay if it's good for you.
I think we're good over here. If anyone wants to leave a comment, let us know.
Yeah, no, and I'm not seeing a comment like that, so it's just me, because right now there's 2 students and my husband, all from home, all on Zoom meetings. So if things are laggy, it's me. But but yeah, so those were some from my very recent sketchbook where I'm playing with toned paper. And sometimes I do toned paper, and sometimes you may not have a toned paper book, but you can use practically anything, like the packing paper from an envelope, or random sheets of, anything you have at home. Or if you don't have stuff, paint a colored square. That's what I often do. I'll put some paint down and go from there.
This one I actually dyed with tea, Lipton tea. And then I was playing around with putting in a little acrylic ground, and just, things you might have at home, and getting a feel. And I know one reason in my work I really love the toned ground as well is that the look and feel for me, with a lot of kind of the naturalist sketches, sort of references this tradition of going out and that painting, and has a kind of can help unify a set of pieces.
And that one with the ground you had, it kind of reminds me of like California terracotta tiles, because you put glaze on the tile, and the warm color of it still shows through the warm earth, and it has that nice feel of I don't know, it can warm up any color. Yeah, exactly.
I am seeing a couple comments that some people don't have sound. Maybe other people watching, could you give us a little thumbs up if you have sound? Not sure if that's a local problem, or I know every time we do an Instagram live, there's always a little troubleshooting. So appreciate any feedback there.
Yeah, and somebody says that the comments when looking on some media are over the page, and that's sort of something that I haven't figured. Apparently on the iPad they're on the side, but it's not something we get to control. And people are saying some people have sound, and sound is great. So I think it might be your settings. We may drop in and out, but that's just the nature of the medium. I mean, it's an imperfect, I kind of like that about it. It's casual. We don't have to do a proper demo and whatever. So watch along. I mean, I talk a lot, but if you didn't hear anything I said, you'd still be fine.
And so I'm making a recording. We'll post this to YouTube, and on the recording, we'll have the comments on the side.
Great.
Anyways, but let's jump to art. How did you make that really beautiful, bold red?
So that's acrylic ink. And so that's sort of one of the joys of working in my studio right now. This is stuff I wouldn't take out into the field. I'm pretty clumsy. Things spill over and things like that. So I have things like acrylic ink sitting in my studio, and it doesn't get used so much when I'm painting so much outside. So it's one of those things that I've been playing with. That's another nice thing about working on tone paper. I've pulled out all this media that is, I usually take one or two things out, a watercolor as a base and something else, but it's been nice to have everything on my desk and be able to use it all on an artwork. So
dive into the bottom of the drawer and see what you have.
Sure.
Wonderful.
And just layer it on. Nothing says I have to be, I mean, my work is really minimalist, but nothing says I can't go completely over the top and use every media out there. So
yeah. Oh, I love that.
So yeah, so that's an acrylic ink base, but you could put almost anything down. I mean, put a patch of watercolor. It'll pick a little bit up when you work over it, but nothing that matters so much. So we'll do a little drawing on this maybe with whatever you have around. So I have around my acrylic ink bottles, so we'll just use those. So I'll talk when I draw. I tend to draw pretty quickly.
I'm curious, Suhita, if you might share some of the different pens and inks you do sketch with.
Of course.
And I've got some goodies too that I've been digging out of my drawers. So I'd love to give
that
people
would be
a
fun.
peek at some different ideas.
What's appeared on my desk just now, that's there are some oldies that are always goodies. And just when I said that, where is my Sailor pen? My Sailor bent nib pen is standard. It lives on my desk. It's part of every sketch kit. I think that's one tool I would always have with me. What's been fun is to use it as a dip pen now that I'm sitting at home. So I'm dipping straight into my ink and using it when I can. But that's my bent nib pen. I have some Posca markers out here. Those are really fun. They're very opaque and they can go over anything. And they're very bright and happy. I have some water-soluble pencils here. And then I have your teeny kit. What do you call this one? The teeny palette?
That one's the Demi. And what have you filled it with? Because it looked like a really neat set of neutrals.
Yes, it is. And maybe if I pull my brush out here, we can look at what's on it. So it's sort of I've been trying to, I love color and I work a lot with color. So it really takes me deciding sometimes to pull away from color. It's a way to study other stuff. So this is my little no color palette. So this square down here, and is that showing fine on your screen? But the palette and because I have a slight lag, so I can't tell.
Yeah.
So this one is really a neutral, which is a mix of ultramarine and transparent red oxide, both Daniel Smith. And then what I have in the two, I have basically the two colors that made the mix, which seems like an odd sort of thing to do. But for me, when I'm working with neutrals, I like to push them back and forth. So I'll take some neutral out.
So I think I've got those on my palette too. So here's a similar mix.
So what I'll do is I'll either push my neutral cool or then push it warm. So I'm basically mixing with the same two colors, and I get to do variation within that, which is kind of fun to do. It still stays in one family. It's two colors, but I'm not stuck with one exact gray that I already mixed.
So are you, and if you might just push your demo just a little bit more to the right-hand side, I think that'll be easier to see. Suhita, when you make that transparent burnt oxide and ultramarine, are you actually pre-mixing the pigments themselves in your palette, like squishing a little bit of each
so
paint,
when
like taking a toothpick?
The big square in there, yes, is the two squeezed from tubes and mixed in there with a toothpick.
Oh, fun.
And and somehow the non-exact mixing of just doing it with a little toothpick keeps, I don't know, it keeps for variation. It's an odd thing. It's not something I'd recommend people do, but I always like to not know exactly what I'll get. It keeps me a little bit on my toes. So it's not a perfect mix. Because you could use, I mean, I do sometimes use Jane's Gray, which is a neutral mixed from two pigments like that, and that'll sit
Yeah,
in
I
my
think I have
palette.
that
But
here.
yeah, it's just that I like the red oxide nicer. So this mix is not burnt sienna, but it's red oxide with ultramarine.
Yeah.
And it
I
lets me
love the
go.
idea of
Yeah.
pre-mixing them, that you've got them um the two pigments to play with and pushing that neutral back and forth.
You
That's a
know
really
what it
wonderful
does is,
idea.
I mean, I still think even when I work at home, kind of like on location, you need some degree of quickness. So I don't want to start from scratch and get my proportion right. So I know this is middle-ish, and then I get to push it if I want to, warm or cool.
And then what are the other pigments in your
And
palette?
the other two is, well, both of them really are titanium white gouache, which is particularly fun right now because I'm working on toned paper. And it's just that one of them is super dirty. If I don't clean my brush all the time.
Oh, me
So
too. Me
yeah, so
too.
what I've done is I've used the two teeny little containers so that one of them, when my brush is dirty, I'm dipping into. And the other I try to keep relatively clean for when I'm picking up those last super white highlights. So really this palette is designed for how I work. I'm not a very careful painter, so it helps to know I will make a mess in my palette. And then the little container I have empty is just to separate them, and because I really want to not bring color into this palette. It's what I use when I'm working with neutrals.
No, that's a fabulous idea. I love it. And I love having the two squares of gouache because I always have one. And then if I have my mixing palette, I'll often add just like a little bit of tiny fresh gouache to it as I use it up. But
And
having the clean area when you want the real fresh brights, and then one that you can just throw your brush in, that's a really great idea.
And I've been using that quite a bit, even with my watercolor palette. My one yellow Hansa medium, I put it in two little half pans, and one I try to keep relatively clean because it's that same idea. I will make a mess of my yellow, so I might as well make a mess of one yellow, which I use for mixing, and use the other one straight out. So
oh no, that is a brilliant suggestion because I always end up having to like clean mine a little bit, to try and find that little clean corner when I want some pure yellow because most of the time I'm mixing greens. So, what a great idea, Suhita.
I've decided I will not be neater, but I can at least set up my palette. That's the nice thing about setting up a custom palette. You get to set it up for your habits and things you like. And I always also like to keep, even in my big palette, an empty space. It's this idea that I will one day find, or I will from somebody discover a fantastic color I love or want to try. And then it's horrible to have to like decide which color to throw out to make space for it. So
oh, what a wonderful idea. Yeah, always have space for one more. Oh, well,
so somebody says my area is not very clear. I'm going to try and put my hand down and see if it focuses. I think that's a bandwidth issue. We'll see.
I think it may be. Hopefully it'll clear
It comes
up.
in and out of better bandwidth. So
yeah. Well, if we end up a little bit blurry on your end, you can take some photographs at the end, and I'll go ahead and upload those, and can even add them to our our video at the end.
And most of this that I'm doing right now is big and bold. So I'm hoping this little exercise we do right now, it won't matter so much if it's not super clear.
All right. So you've got your nice ground, and I'll just show briefly. I have a favorite pen. I'm going to have to buy a Sailor Fude pen because between you and Paul and some other artists, they sound so attractive. But this is a carbon platinum ink. I've always been really drawn to really fine lines. I used to sketch a lot with this rapidograph, which is a little bit fussy, like especially with altitude changes. But then I also I was feeling inspired by you. This is a chopstick that I brought painting when I was traveling in 2005. I had all these beautiful pens, and I was going through an airport security, and they stole my nibs. So I got a chopstick. I was in Asia and sharpened my chopstick. And so this is the same one. And then I've enjoyed dipping it in ink.
Wow.
And I found an old walnut ink that I used to use a lot. So I haven't used these recently, but in the interest of pulling from watercolors, I thought I'd play with these for our demo together.
That's fantastic. Oh, that's great to have a stick. I don't have a stick that I can find right now. There's various sharpened sticks lying around that I haven't been able to find right now when we're doing this. But Yeah, so that's fabulous. So the carbon platinum is probably the other extreme of the kind of nib. So for me, a fine nib, I should really pull mine out and play with it, because it's something I find a little bit difficult to draw with. So that's a good idea. I'm going to pull it out and play with it.
Push your comfort zone there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I love seeing comments that some people just use the end of their brush as a stick, which is a really nice opportunity.
Totally. I mean, sharpen the end of your brush and you have a great stick. So the brush I carry around, let me see if I can find it. There you go. The brush I carry around in my water travel kit is like that, with the end sharpened. And that's an idea I got from Liz Steele. And it's really to keep it straight, because it sits up, dug into something in your in its little toothbrush case when it travels, but it also makes a great dip pen. So yeah.
All right. Well, should we go ahead and get started?
Sure. Let's start on this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'll use the little. I mean, you could use a tinted paper. I'll use the little square since I painted it in. And it's kind of interesting to draw on tinted paper, because when you're drawing, let me do a quick little drawing so I know where I'm going. When you're drawing on just white paper or painting on white paper, I think there's a really different kind of thinking involved from when you draw and paint on a tinted paper, because I'll draw one outside and one inside, so you can see how what we get to paint and leave out really makes a difference, I think, to how you think. Let's see. So I'm going to use just black and white. I have 2 bottles of ink here. I don't know if they're in your picture.
Yep.
All right.
Oh, and you've got half on the tinted and half off.
I think I'll just do it like that so you can see the difference in the thinking between doing it like that.
Yeah.
And the colors I'll use to draw it in is just black and white. And anything, watercolor. I happen to have my acrylic inks here, and I always have these current obsessions. Then they last a couple of weeks, and then some things stay and some things don't. So we'll see what happens with acrylic ink. But right now it's an obsession. It's so bright. It looks like printing inks. It's so fake. I'm really enjoying that. So when you're drawing on, I think, a white paper, we're used to drawing on white paper where you think of what's dark, you think of what's middle tone maybe, and you think very much about highlights, especially if you work a lot on watercolors, highlights that you want to leave untouched.
I always say that the first step is, you protect your brights as you do your big areas.
Sure.
Protect your brights. But on a tinted paper, that bright you get to add in at the end.
Yes. So it really brings something different, I think, to working on paper. So this is sort of, I'll do a quick idea of how I usually think on, how we all usually think when we work on white paper.
And you're doing some terrific, sketchy, you're using your brush as a mix of drawing and painting there.
And I like doing that. I think if it were a word, if you could be a painter or a drawer, I think I am mostly a drawer. If I have to do just one thing, I will draw, not paint. So my brush needs to function tip up. I think almost all tools I like. That's why they have sort of things like versatile tips. They need to work as drawing and painting. And I like my line to be big, bold, messy, probably. Messy is something, I don't know, it comes naturally to me, I think.
Embrace it.
It's always been like that. I used to think I have to fight it. I think I'm just going to stay messy. It works for me.
I've got a question, which is something I've enjoyed sketching with before, are these Tomboy pens or Tomboy that are water soluble, and they've got a brush tip and then a fine tip. And when I've used these, I've often had just a water brush with me, so that I can let the ink then
dissolve,
flow. Since it's a water soluble ink, I feel like so much of my work is with waterproof. but
Yes, yes.
let me just
And
throw
that
some water on
yeah, I
this.
don't have a tomboy with me right now, but I do have, let's see, this is an Ecoline brush pen, which I think functions the same way. If I put down some line and it's a nice thick line, I could then go back in, and it's really fun to get washes out of. Somebody made a comment on the brush I'm using, which is it's a general purpose, not watercolor brush, which is because I'm using stuff like acrylic inks, and would be far too damaging to regular watercolor brushes. So if I'm mixing media, I'm not going to use my watercolor brushes if I can remember.
So I'll add to that with gouache. Gouache is a water-based ink. So if anyone out there is just doing a little gouache, like white gouache with their watercolor, I think that's
oh yeah,
that's
that's
fine.
totally
Yeah,
fine.
but yeah, mixing in the acrylics.
No, it's the acrylics that are you don't want to go where. So yeah, so that first little bottle I have there, I guess it's done the way I would paint whenever I'm thinking on white paper. And then we'll do the second bottle I have in here, in which I get to not think of my midtones. It's kind of fun to pull out drama and try to make an object
Yeah.
with just what you have left when you don't think of the midtones, which is not how I usually think. I'm coloring my midtones in, I'm saving my whites. So this is kind of a different, for the second bottle, I have to think differently.
Yeah.
What is the paper you're using, Maria? Somebody wants to know.
For many, many years. So I discovered toned paper after I saw an exhibit of Thomas Moran's work, who did all these field sketches of Yosemite and Yellowstone. So the exhibit had his giant oil paintings, 12 feet wide, just huge. And but they also had all his field sketches, and he did a lot of work on toned with white gouache. So I started using Canson. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right. Canson Mitent or Tint.
I know what I forget how you say that. In fact, I've never known how you say that.
Yeah, me neither. I've used it since like 2004, and I get it in a lot of different colors. I've even done red before, but I've got like a sand and cream, and it's a pretty lightweight paper. And what I like about it for field sketching is, since it's so light, it dries really quickly. So just like we've been talking about, if I'm somewhere, here's a sketch from the Grand Canyon, and that tone really sets the mood, or these were geese up in Greenland, and very quick gesture sketches, but having a mood and a base really unified it. But another paper I really love that I've used for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years now is it's an Arches cover that comes in a cream, and it's very soft, and I love this. And I do larger studio and field paintings.
And when you're saying soft, is it soft to touch, like
it's literally soft
paper?
Yep, it's like and it's not as stiff, as it doesn't have the same sizing, like the same amount of, I feel like kind of the glue or whatnot, that helps bring the watercolor paper together. So it handles a little differently, but absorbs color beautifully. And it's very forgiving to work with, and heavy enough to take repeated washes and layers. And
I see.
So I love this paper. It comes in a non-cream as well, but I use it a lot in the field and studio. And I think the color is really nice.
Yeah, nice. I don't know the paper, so I will look out for that.
And I just got, I don't know if you've worked on this too. I haven't seen their watercolor paper yet, but I just got in the mail the Hanemule Cappuccino and Gray book.
No, that one's in the mail. I don't have it yet. I was hoping it would be in today, but no.
Yeah, I need to get the watercolor version too. The Cappuccino is just 55 pounds, so I'm going to test it, but I think it's going to be a little lightweight for more of the heavier water media. But they're quite lovely looking, so a couple new toys.
Beautiful colors. Yeah. Because I have, what do I have? The book I was using is the Stillman and Byrne. Where did it go? The Stillman and Byrne tinted paper book, and that comes in a brown and a gray. And yeah, I would love to use some new colors. That would be fun.
Yeah, with
So yeah,
the
this is
Mecan, you
just
can really
quick
get
and
any.
messy, but really it's the idea of trying to find, the drama of drawing it another way, or what it makes you see. It's not even a perfect, neat little sketch, but it makes you look another way at things. And I've been really enjoying that in my practice just now to pull up things and draw them a different way and see what comes out. It's
Well,
drawing the same thing 5 times
yeah.
over.
I love what you're leaving unsaid there too. Like in your piece on red, you're not drawing around everything, but you're drawing the shapes. We're painting shapes and painting those white and letting the red have some negative space. And that's really fun.
Yeah, it's fun to do it that way. It just makes you see different parts of it. I think we're so used to seeing one way. I think as if you work in watercolors, you're so used to seeing around the highlights. It kind of makes you focus a little more to see around something else.
Well, I wonder if we should jump to, I know you posted that really beautiful shared image of, I'm assuming it's your cat.
Yes, who's always on my desk. In fact, when you asked for an image, he was on my desk. So that's the picture I took, which is why the mess around him.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, let's jump to painting something more like what you'd regularly do in your sketchbook and seeing what that brings to yeah, so I'm
going to say I was inspired by you with your cat sketch because I was trying to corner. We have 2 studio cats, and
I saw your
I posted a
picture.
photo. Yeah, so if anyone wants to download it, there's a link in my bio. You can download the photo of my cats when they were a little younger, Ada and Rosa. So I think I'll use that as my inspiration today.
Lovely. And I have on there, let me see if I'm in the picture. Yeah, I'm in the picture right here. And I do have my reference cat sketch here, but it's really something, the idea of painting something again, a regular scene, something you'd see around, but getting to paint on the drama of the whites is what you get when you work on tinted paper. So I'll do a quick little sketch and go from there.
Part of what we've been talking about, and you're saying too, is that you can approach the same subject over and over again, but with different materials to see it with fresh eyes.
Yeah, because I think part of what happens, it's not so much that we don't have, part of what we do when we go new places or to find new subjects is we're keeping the eye fresh. I think that's a huge part of what keeps it exciting, keeping the eye fresh. And if you stick in if everything is the same, the subjects are the same, the material is the same, the way you look at it is the same, it gets harder and harder to look at it with fresh eyes. So to me, it's an aid to just keeping it fresh, to change up things, to keep them a little bit not so predictable. Because if I've done something before and I know how to draw it and I draw it again tomorrow, I don't know if that's so exciting to me. So a lot of what I do is really to entertain and amuse myself.
Well, that's why we love art, all of us. There's the big picture right there, Suhita.
Yeah, and that's the nice thing about staying in experimental mode when it's for yourself, and mostly the person that needs to be happy with it is you. I think you're far freer to experiment because it doesn't have to work out. It just has to keep me happy while I'm drawing.
And you and Paul Wang have been doing a playground, like an art sketch playground,
yes,
kind of
that's
along
right.
these lines.
Yeah. So that actually came out of, Paul and I have talked before about the idea of play. We both do a lot of splashing, throwing, not perfect sort of stuff in our work. But this became a perfect opportunity to kind of bring that to the foreground because we're all in lockdown. I mean, when has the whole world been in lockdown before? And yeah, so that made it a good time to really, we started just pulling together little groups, and we have this sort of open playground. It's by donation now because we got way more response than we thought we would get. We thought, 5 people will come and play with us. And it got so huge that it's now in Eventbrite listing by donation. We do different themes every week, like we're doing Free Your Line next week. And it's really not a workshop. It's come play. We do a few directed exercises. It's been a lot of fun. It's been great fun.
That
Yeah.
sounds so wonderful. I hope I can join sometime, Suhita.
Yeah, it'd be fun. So I'm going to still stay with my little palette, and then I'll use random things I have on my desk. I have water-soluble pencils here. I have my Posca markers. We'll see what comes up. But really what's interesting to me is that most of the cat, he's sort of the color of my page. So I can mostly count on drawing him with the color of the page and not doing much to it. So I'm going to try and do that. So I'm looking at my sketch, and I think the tip of his nose and his, and perhaps some of his ears have a little bit of a warmer color. And then definitely his collar, which is a bright red. But other than that, I'm going to kind of work around him and first try to establish a big shape without touching him. So, and it's interesting to see, like you're also working on tinted paper and probably going to the same idea once you have your cats drawn in. And very often people ask how much you draw of something or how little. And I think that's personal. It's what makes you comfortable or what gives you enough of a scaffolding to feel that you can jump off and be, play on it. So
yeah,
I don't think it's so much, do you draw quickly or slowly? Do you draw a lot or a little? Do enough to make yourself feel comfortable to play on top of that. So
yeah, it's coming down to what you enjoy and what resonates with you, which is
sure.
part of finding your voice as an artist too.
Of course.
That experimenting. And I know something I've always loved is I am so drawn to these little fine pens that you can kind of scritch and scratch around. It's just
yeah.
I really
and that
enjoy
says something about
feel.
the sort of artwork you like, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
and that's good. I think it's good to stretch some and do the things you're less likely to do, but also to embrace how you draw. Because so much of what you do, Maria, isn't it right that it needs to be, I mean, when you're drawing on your expeditions, it needs to be technically correct. You can't take huge liberties, right? Or it would be...
I do a mix where I feel like I'm trying to help tell stories.
Yes.
But I tend to be more realistic and, where it comes back for studio reflection. But I know, I wish I had it handy to show you. Maybe I do. Let me pull out something kind of fun.
Of course.
So, I haven't pulled this out for years, Suhita. This is from 2003, a sketchbook I made, a big book on a college trip. And in this book...
There's a lag for me, so I'll wait for it. It'll turn up.
So this book I made it my challenge in this book. I bound it myself with tons of different... I'll have to zoom out my camera a little bit. Tons of different colors of paper. And this was my messy book. And I just said, I'm going to be as messy and gestural as possible. And then I had a sketchbook that I wasn't. Oh, here's some resolutions. I haven't looked at this thing for years. But it was so much fun just to have...
And I love the ones like on the red paper with
the... Yeah, red paper. And so I bound within the sketchbook, this was a mix of
and say that again, is it a book you made or is it a book
I bound this myself, and that having it as a complete place where I said this is where I'm just as messy as possible was really refreshing. And I often work loose leaf, but I think working in sketchbooks or giving yourself a bit of a project where you have permission to just play and mess around can feel so good.
And I think this is a really good time, especially for people who usually go out and do plein air paintings and stuff. You're not doing those, and you're not doing big, so you're drawing, if you're drawing from observation, you're drawing really personal stuff, not the sort of stuff that makes paintings people buy. And if that's what you need to have permission to play, go for it. It's a great time to experiment with stuff, because we will one day go back to some version of what we did before, and maybe you won't stay so loose and so, you know, without your art having to, I don't know, be sellable, I don't know what to call it, but it's really been a freeing time to make and play with whatever you want.
I agree so much. And getting to connect in these ways is really wonderful to help inspire each other. It's meant meant a lot to me, both personally and you know, artistically, to see the different ways of doing things and feel less alone.
Yeah, yeah, it's odd. We're so distanced locally, and yet when I get online and we do a session like this, it would be interesting to have people say, I mean, I know it's nighttime in some parts of the world, so it's hard to come in from there, but it's just been super interesting where people come in from and who you get to, you know, hang out with online.
Yeah, definitely a high point for me of reaching out more to everybody else.
Sure, sure.
So tell me, you've done you're that gorgeous background too. I feel like I often sort of work small scale out. So I'm going to take a leap now and just paint on the little creative background. I'll
sure.
save some neutrals
and
for
what
fun.
that does is immediately your cats are foreground and center as soon as you do that. And I've moved to Posca markers now, so I'm playing with some of that texture that can bring in.
So in thinking about doing, as you approach a sketch, are you like sort of thinking about sort of getting that overall shape mapped out first, like in mapping out the background?
It is something I've taught myself to do. I'm usually a scribbler, so I will just come in with line and start making lines. So I've been actually very, I have made it a point to try and work like this in big shape. It's not something that comes naturally to me, but it is fun to do. And I love messing around and adding lots of texture and you know, ornamentation basically. Like I will love playing with this fur forever in a messy way, and knowing that if I put big shape down first, what happens is it stays unified, because if I start the other way and start messing bit by bit, it can get out of hand to where everything is its own thing and not unified. So
that's a wonderful point. So you're applying and working your way around the whole page.
Yes.
And paying attention to it and getting, I mean, I guess when I think about watercolor straight up, I always think about, you know, those big shapes. So you're really getting all of your big shapes.
So I am doing that. Yeah. But basically, I mean, I did vary my background to have basically that's the warm, cool and neutral out of my little palette. That's all I'm working with. And by doing that, I got variety in there. So it's not one flat gray. But it's still not named things. And its real point is to kind of pull out the shape of the cat. So it stays interesting enough that it's not a boring, bland rectangle down there, but it doesn't have to be jumping out and have all the details. Because if you look at this photograph I took, he's on my desk and it has all the mess that lived on my desk. And I'm not sure I want to paint all of that or have to paint all of that. That's the other thing that's been a challenge. How has it been for you, Maria, to work so much from, I don't know, are you working a lot from photographs?
Well, you know, so I had an exhibition planned for the fall that I put the development on, mostly on hold, just because I have this daughter who's almost 5.
Yes.
And so between you know, art toolkit project and going out and sketching with my daughter. I had very little time for studio painting. My field sketching, I tend just to do a lot of sketching around town. And then my studio work tends to focus on developing project paintings. And so,
are they from your own sketches mostly?
They're from my own sketches and then photographs as well that I'll use for inspiration. But really, I feel grounded in having it be grounded in field work.
Yeah. So it's been for me quite a challenge because I don't usually work from photographs, and it's odd. Nobody said you had to be completely, you know, you had to reproduce a photograph as is, but I have to constantly remind myself that I get to take what I want and leave out, because the camera, you know, unlike the eye, the camera sees everything together. And if you just reproduce what it's, to me, it takes away that human quality of how I see. If I reproduce a photograph with everything sharp and visible and focused on, because we see so differently. We see in bits, we see each little bit on its own.
Yeah, and that for me is just the value of field sketching and keeping having that choice of what we see and get to express. So in my own expeditionary artwork, I try to bring that sense of field to the studio, of having seen what already interested me and have an awareness of, oh, these patterns, you know, are something that captures my attention, and bring that in. But yeah, that's a challenge of photos. One thing I often suggest to people if they are working from photos is to make them black and white so that you can focus on value. Instead of, you know, just trying to match every color. And then there's some filters you can apply to even just like exaggerate shapes that I think can be really fun to play with too.
Those would be, it would be interesting if you could post some of that, because I don't know about it. And I'm always trying to see, well, when I take my own photographs, they're pretty bad. I'm not a good photographer, but I know what interested me. I remember it from location. So that helps too, to work from your own stuff. However, somebody else said also, if you're working from a screen, and I've been trying this, put the screen further away than you usually, then you look at your computer or your iPad or whatever. And it sort of takes away that minutia that you might be tempted to paint. Somebody asked what book I'm working in. That's a Stillman and Byrne tinted paper book. I'm forgetting what it's called. I think it's called the Nova. But that's the book I'm working in right now.
Yeah, I was going to say the filter on Photoshop that I use is called posturizing. Excuse me.
Okay. Yes, and then you can set your levels to how much you posterize, right? That's interesting. You know,
or how many values too, so you can posturize.
I don't tend to mix my two practices, my graphic design, and it's odd you mentioned that, because posterized filter I've used in graphic design a lot, and not thought to use it like that. Thank you for that.
It's kind of just a sketch tool for me, and saying, you know, where are my values? And,
sure. It's kind of like doing those, I don't know if I'm saying it right, the Japanese word notan sketches, where you take the work and do it in black and white. Then you add a middle gray value. And you can do that with the posterize tool, right? You can split it into different number of grays. Thank you. Now I will try that.
Okay, I'm being much more painterly here with an ink sketch than I might normally. So you're helping push me a bit, Suhita.
And isn't that interesting? I do find that when I work online with other people, you become you become a bit of a comedian. It's some of everything. I mean, I tend to revert back to what I do after a while, but it's nice to be sort of in the mode of somebody else for a while.
Play and experiment. So what else is on your plate these days, Suhita? I know you have a book you've been working on.
That's right. I have
workshops and
Yeah, so the in-person workshops aren't happening anymore, but Paul Wangan and I are doing the sketching playground, which is we have a mailing list now, and so every week that you want to join in, you just mail us and we send you the links, and whoever signs up.
Where do we sign up for your
mailing list? It's on my blog. Under the workshops tab is how you mail us, because I don't like blasting it on my social media every day, because some people want to join in, some people just want to come look at your artwork. So it's on my blog under the workshops tab, and then you can get on a mailing list. And yes, the book, I'm done with the first draft, so now it's mostly with the publisher, but it's part of the series of urban sketching handbooks, the little black books. That there's been books by Gabby Campanero, there's Shari Blokoff, and Uma Kelkar did one on Procreate drawing. It's a series, and I'm doing one that's sort of going back to basics. It's called Urban Sketching for Beginners. So I've really tried to break this process down for somebody that's that may or may not have drawn on, drawn and painted, but it's definitely doing this in this on location way for the first time. So it's sort of ironic. When I wrote it a few months before this happened, I didn't know we were going to be home so much, but the book really starts by making you be an urban sketcher at home. So this idea of looking at the world around you and drawing can be applied a fair bit to drawing at home, which is most people's comfort zone when they're starting out. So a lot of the drawing in there is things you'll find around your home. Just these, what I call non-setup still lifes, you know, the dirty dishes in your sink and or the view out of your window is another exercise I have in there. So it was fun doing that one. It was
yeah, I look forward to seeing it when it's out. We'll be sure to check it out.
Yeah,
and,
I have a couple of your pieces in there. I know I have the boats on the Great Day. That was a great piece. Yeah. And so yeah, this is the general idea, and you can keep taking it further. I mean, it's however far you like taking it, but I have a big picture cat in there, and you can see even in the blurry image you're getting that this paper really makes the white of the cat stand out because he's carved out, and then everything, you know, you made me think of that. Everything does have that warm tone. Even the white has the warm tone because it's on the tinted paper. Which if you're a beginning sketcher is great because your colors tend to fly all over the color palette and then it looks like you painted a rainbow on your page. So maybe tinted paper should be something a beginner should really try because it makes for a unified palette.
Yeah, it echoes that that limited palette. It's like a shortcut there, and in focusing on value.
And also just really a limited palette. I mean, I love that this is little. Because in my book, I'm not going to go beyond this. I'm going to maybe throw in some colored pencils, but those are all going to be accent things. You know, there's a difference between accent colors and using a big palette of every color on the planet. And then it's so hard to unify.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to post your colors in a little follow-up if we may. And
of course.
Yeah. And I think it's just a terrific idea. I'm so glad that you've been enjoying your little palette, and your work is just so much fun to follow, Suhita.
Thank you. It's been fun to do this because, you know, every time it's interesting. Every time you talk to somebody, they bring their viewpoint into it. Like I have little notes scribbled on the side of it of many things you mentioned that I must now look up. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, everybody who's logged on to view, thank you so much for joining us today. The recording of this will be available in my stories for the next 24 hours, and then we'll be posting an archive online. And Suhita, I look forward to getting to connect and keep in touch with you in,
of course,
in the days to come. Thank you again.